Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me here on the Royal House of Ra. I am your host, Amenhotep Khufu El Ra, and today's show is episode 16. We will be discussing two dynasties, Dynasty 13 and Dynasty 14. Now, these two dynasties are significant because these dynasties were the dynasties in which Kemet was still politically stable right after the 12th dynasty. Now, after the 12th dynasty, the last ruler of the 12th dynasty, there was a smooth transition between the 12th and 13th dynasty, despite the successional difficulties suggested by the presence of a woman on the throne at the end of the 12th dynasty. Okay, so we're going to go into that and discuss that today. And then we're going to have a treat for the next episode I'm going to give you, because the next episode is episode 17, and that will air on Monday, which that would be Monday, March 7th. And on that day, we will be discussing dynasties 15, 16, and 17. This is Dynasty 15 is the beginning of the Hyksos. If everybody know anything about Kemet, the Hyksos dynasty was Dynasty 15, and this was the invader. These were invaders who occupied and ruled Kemet for I would say for about a century, but they have caused many devastations during this period. This is the period when Kemet was weak and invaders was coming in, and the Hyksos was the first invaders that came in and ruled. Set up a dynasty. It took until the 17th dynasty, the Theban dynasty, to remove them, and then the official of the 18th dynasty. We'll go into that on Monday. So for today's show, episode 16, we're going to focus on the 13th and 14th dynasties. Before we move any further, I'd like to give a thanks to those who subscribe. There has been some new subscribers. I want to give a thanks to those subscribers, and for those who share the show, and those who also like the show as well. What I would ask for all of you who tune into the show, please subscribe, hit the notification button so you know when new shows appear. Also like and share the content. Okay, so now let's get into this. Before I go into it, let me give you the names of the pharaohs of these two dynasties. Okay, Dynasty 13 have, I would say, about 8 pharaohs of this dynasty, and Dynasty 14 had 1. So let me go through the pharaohs of the 13th dynasty, and then I'll move on to the pharaoh of the 14th dynasty. Okay, the first pharaoh of the 13th dynasty was Wegaf. He reigned in 1782 BC to 1778 BC. Then after him was Ameny Intef IV, who reigned in 1760 BC. He didn't reign too long. And then it was Hor, who reigned in 1760 BC. So it looks like it was one didn't reign for so long, and it looked like somebody may have toppled someone. But let's look into that and see if that was the case. Then you had Sobekhotep II, who reigned in 1750 BC. Then Khendjer, who reigned in 1747 BC. Then Sobekhotep III, who reigned in 1745 BC. Then you had Neferhotep I, who reigned in 1741 BC to 1730 BC. Then you had Sobekhotep IV, who reigned 1730 BC to 1720 BC. Then you had who reigned in 1720 BC. Then you had Neferhotep II, and it doesn't give a date in when he reigned. Now I'm going to go into Dynasty 14, which was with Nehesy, but it also does not show a period when his reign began. So I'm assuming that this was like quick succession between these kings. It was kind of short-lived. They didn't last for too long, but let's find out what happened here. Okay, excuse me for that. The transition to the 13th dynasty seems to have been a smooth one, despite the successional difficulties suggested by the presence of a woman on the throne at the end of the 12th dynasty. 10 kings are listed for the new dynasty, which lasted for about 70 years, and they appear to have kept a degree of control over both Upper and Lower Kemet, still ruling from XIII near the Pharaoh until the reign of the Penumite king Neferhotep I, 1720 BC. Instead, the internal chaos ascribed to the period in earlier literature is not so extreme as was once thought. Central government was sustained during most of the dynasty, and the country remained relatively stable. Evidence in the shape of inscriptions recording the Nile levels during some of the 13th dynasty reigns indicates that a presence was maintained in the south, which says much for the strength of monarchical authority to the north. The true chronological of the 13th dynasty is rather hard to ascertain, since there are few monuments dating from the period. Many of the kings' names are known only from an old fragmentary inscription or a little later in the period from scarabs. Neferhotep I was the last king of the dynasty to be mentioned by name on monuments in Upper and Lower Kemet, and it seems that the Eastern Delta broke away under its own petty kings about the time of his death. The confusion that followed is evident from the tales of woe in the contemporary papyri. Our knowledge of the first new monarchs is rather scanty, but the burial of Hor, the third king, was found at Dashur, near the pyramid of Ameny Intef IV. This site was presumably chosen to indicate solidarity and continuity with the previous dynasty. According to the fragmentary royal canon of Turan Papyrus, Hor's reign lasted only a matter of months, and his burial was relatively poor and low-key. Nevertheless, it was intact and yielded a wooden shrine enclosing an impressive life-size wooden car statue of the king. At Saqqara, there are 4 small, originally limestone cased brick pyramids ascribed to kings of the period, one at least to be identified with the fifth ruler, Khendjer Kare. Gustav Jarre, the Swiss excavator, found very well preserved internal arrangements within this pyramid. Its entrance passage from the west face was protected by two great quartzites, portcullis, after which a complicated system of small passages eventually led to the burial chamber, which had been hollowed out of a monolithic block of quartzites. Despite all these precautions, the robbers succeeded in reaching the chamber and infecting a small entry through hard stone, although it is unclear whether there had ever been a burial within it. The identity of the builder was only revealed when fragments of palm-shaped columns found in the nearby mortuary temple produced cartouches of Khendjer. Jacquard also found the king's inscribed black granite pyramid badly smashed in the temple ruins. Within a nearby enclosure were three burial shafts leading to underground rooms, each with a roughly finished quartzite sarcophagus, and there was also a small brick core pyramid. All were no doubt intended for royal ladies, but were apparently never used. Graffiti on some blocks indicated a reign of 4 years for King Khendjer. Around the middle of the dynasty, three brothers, Neferhotep I, Sobekhotep IV, and Sahathor, seem to have reigned, although the last may not actually have been a king but merely a prince. Evidence of overseas connections is furnished by inscriptions and a relief from Baupolis of Neferhotep with his vessel. Yankton, Prince of Baupolis, seated before him. There are also records of an expedition to the mines of the eastern desert. Neferhotep's son, Wa Neferhotep, is known from a wooden Ashhabit found at Lish, now in New York, but the presumably predeceased his father. Several large red granite statues of Sobekhotep survive, 3 of them found at Tanis in the Delta, where they were probably taken either from Memphis or Avaris, Tel El Dabad. Later in the 21st or 22nd dynasty, coincidental with the last years of the 13th dynasty, the obscured 14th dynasty ruled from the eastern delta. It lasted for some 57 years, although only 2 kings are known from contemporary monuments. The epochal kings of the 14th dynasty were not the only group to set themselves up alongside the main house at the end of the 13th dynasty. A series of Semitic kings was beginning to assume control in the eastern desert and delta regions of Kemet. These rulers, the 15th dynasty, are known as the Hyksos, desert princes. Often inadequately referred to as the Shepherd Kings. Okay, so that's where I'm going to leave off here. And now it's going to go into the 15th dynasty. And we're going to, next week, as I said, on March 7th, at 5 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So we're going to, next week, we'll be discussing the 15th dynasty, the beginning of the Hyksos reign, who ruled. They were the founders of the 15th dynasty. Then you had the 16th dynasty, which was only 2 pharaohs of that dynasty. And then you had the 17th dynasty, which was the Theban dynasty. This was a native dynasty. These were Kemetans who fought back and forth with the Hyksos to reclaim Kemet. Okay, so we're going to get into that. So once again, thank you for tuning in to today's show. I hope that this was helpful, and I look forward in seeing all of you on Monday, March 7th, and where we will discuss, as I mentioned before, the 15th, 16th, and 17th dynasty, and the beginning of the Hyksos rule of Kemet. Once again, thank you for tuning in to the Royal House of Ra. I am your host, Ameny Intef IV, and have a blessed day and take care.